Welcome to the All About Us podcast. I have a great guest today. It's going to be a story about resilience through storytelling, finding strength in our stories. Let me start again one more time here. I kind of fumbled. Welcome to the All About Us podcast. Today, we have a great guest here. Welcome to today's episode where we will explore resilience through the lens of storytelling and creativity. I'm thrilled to welcome Rita Avellar, a Brazilian-born storyteller, writer, filmmaker based in Indianapolis. Rita brings over 20 years of experience in branding and content creation. But what makes her story particularly powerful is how she transformed her challenges into art. As a breast cancer survivor and creator of the short film The Fat Lady, Rita knows firsthand about resilience and the power of authentic storytelling. Welcome to the show, Rita. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Carl. Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of your podcast. I'm feeling great today.
That's good. You've worn many hats: writer, filmmaker, brand storyteller. Could you take us back to your roots in Brazil and how your journey as a storyteller began?
Yeah, I used to say that since I've learned how to write, to read and write, I'm creating stories. When I
At what age did that start?
learned when I was 6 years old,
Wow.
yeah. I always loved like hearing a story, and then when I started reading and writing, I already started like creating stories.
Okay.
My mom has saved some of those stories, and there's some books that I used to, write and draw my stories when I was 7 years old. So I was really a storyteller, since the beginning of my life.
That's great.
Yeah. Like I said, I always love listen to stories. I always love, listen to my mom's reading books, and so that was kind of a natural way for me to express, my ideas. And then also, along with reading and writing, since I was a little girl, I was really into movies.
Okay.
So my first passion was E.T.
My goodness.
I
Okay.
I was like big fan of E.T. and because of E.T. and Indiana Jones and all Steven Spielberg, whereas there was a Steven Spielberg finger on it, I was into
E.T. Ouch.
E.T. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Back home, and
Okay.
so my family, my mom is an actress,
Okay.
and my dad was a musician. So my whole childhood was into arts and culture and
Entertainment.
entertainment, and music was part of my life, basically. It's funny how I end up not doing anything related to music.
Okay.
I don't know how to play any songs. I don't know how to sing. I pretend I know how to sing, but I'm
Okay.
not. But I still want to do something related to music. Even being
Yeah.
like a DJ
Okay.
is one of my plans. But for sure, like culture, art is part of my being. Yeah, so it started like that. I always love a good story.
Okay. Now, your path led from Brazil to Indianapolis with stops which included San Diego, where you studied creative writing. How has these different cultural experiences shaped your perspective on the world and helped you to develop, that level of resilience that you have that allows you to, overcome many obstacles?
So I think that resilience is deeply rooted in ability of adapt yourself. So when you're resilient, you're able to adapt to to adapt to any environment. And being like an immigrant, that means that you're stepping into a culture that is
Hmm.
not yours, right? It's
Correct.
not your own culture. And then while it's not always like about fitting in or
Mhm.
molding yourself to fit in, it's all about like how to find ways to adapt yourself. So it's all about like kind of curving out like a space to be authentic,
Mhm.
to be your authentic self
Right.
within another culture that is different than yours, and learning how to navigate into the new norms and finding ways and openings to thrive while staying true to yourself. So I think each new culture experience that we have, it teaches you to be flexible, teach you flexibility, creativity, and perceive, when you face a challenge. So um, I think it has to do with that, and be able to adapt and be open.
How old were you the first time you came to the United States?
How was?
How old were
How
you?
old? Oh, sorry. I was pretty young. I was 17 years old. And I was an exchange student.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was like a big difference comparing to where I used to live and where I was raised and where I went first time.
Okay, so tell me, let's digress a little bit. Tell me about where you were lived at in Brazil and what was it like? What was the culture like? And what was your childhood?
So first of all, I came from a big city. So
Okay.
that's is a big thing in my life. I came from Rio de Janeiro.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, and Rio, it has that cool vibe,
Right.
like kind of a
Different.
California vibe. But also it is a big city, and I lived for just like a really short time in my life in this really small town when I was like 2 years old. But most part of my life it was just like living in Rio. So the culture was the beach culture.
The beach
Going,
culture.
yeah, it's like really relaxed environment and not formal, really casual. There's a thing we say in Rio. There's a funny things we do as a carioca. Carioca is people
Hmm.
who was born in Rio. That we do is like we meet someone
Hmm.
and we always really nice and say, "Hey,
Right.
call me later,"
Yeah, right.
but we never call back.
So, well, it's kind of strange you said that because I went to Puerto Rico this summer. I'm getting ready to go back to Puerto Rico in less than a month, and I'll be moving to Puerto Rico
Nice.
early next year. And it's the same thing. Everything's the beach culture. So a
Hmm.
lot of people go to the beach,
Yeah.
eating and having something to drink at night. You're either going to the beach or you're going out somewhere to eat and have a drink at night.
Yeah.
The culture here in the United States is like, okay, you work to go on vacation like 1 or 2 weeks out of the year. And it's like back there in Puerto Rico, it's like almost like people work to be on vacation. Your
Yes.
life
Yes.
is more casual and more of a
Yeah.
vacation than it is to work. So you only work as much as you really have to. It's
Yeah.
more relaxing and laid
Yeah.
back and
And
everything.
and we say that in Rio that we live. I mean, not right now because I don't live there anymore, but we live in a place where you go for vacation.
Right.
So, but just to let you know, the culture from Rio is completely different than the culture from São Paulo, which is another big city, which is like more kind of a New York.
Hmm.
And like São Paulo is is really linked to work, work, work. And
Okay.
Rio it has this
Uh,
relaxed vibe. So I was born and raised in Rio, and I still carry that. I'm a workaholic, just to let you know, but I carry that easygoing vibe and relaxed vibe of getting close to the ocean
That's good.
type
That's
of thing.
good. That's good. It's funny because, after I got out the military, I spent so much time in the water. So since 1988 up until this year, I really spent no time in the water. And it's like once I got to Puerto Rico, I was in the water every day, whether it was the pool or the ocean. I spent in 10 days in Puerto Rico, I spent more time in the water than I've done in maybe like the last 35 years. So, it's interesting
It is.
about that. So, what were the major differences that you experienced at 17 coming from Rio to here in the United States? And what city did you land in? Was that San Diego?
No, and
And
that's
go ahead.
the thing. I end up going to a city called South Bend,
Indiana.
Indiana, which is where they have the Notre Dame University.
Mhm.
So it is a small city, but also has like a big uh,
College.
college. Oh, and I used to live really close to Notre Dame, so it had that vibe of like a college city.
City.
However, it was so tiny comparing to Rio.
Correct.
And like I said, I had this easygoing life in Rio, but it was a big city. And big city means violent city, buzzes, noise, and then you get street smart, right?
Mhm.
Because you live in a big city. And
City.
then yeah. So when I was in South Bend, I was like, man, I'm years advanced in like knowing what's going
Right.
on, and
Right. It seemed very slow to you.
so slow. So that was my first like shocking.
Okay.
So it was funny because I was coming from a country that in during that time was considered the third world
Right.
country.
But
And
Indiana was the fourth world.
in the 90s, in 1990, it was. And
Right.
then, so people would come to me and ask, so do you live on the trees, or do you have monkeys on your streets and snakes? And I was like, man, grow up. I can see like more stuff, like really like rural things here than in my city.
Right. 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 They're thinking you live in, out in the jungle and everything else, and you're trying to adapt to the trees and then
Exactly.
the wind and how quiet it is and everything else and all this open space. So once again, there's different types of stereotyping and different types of racism. And
Yeah.
so when a lot of people think about Brazil being based here from the United States, they kind of attach it to the same stigma they would Africa.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. The same thing.
So
The
it
same
has
thing.
that same racial stigmatism
Hmm.
that they think they're so far advanced than everybody else. When in
Yeah.
actuality, I mean,
Yeah.
some of the cities overseas just dwarf what we
Exact
have here.
exactly. And it's funny because you mentioned that, because if someone is listening to the podcast and not seeing us,
Right,
so I'm really white
right,
and blonde and
right,
have gray eyes. And so here in the US, especially when I was 17, they were like, "Where are you from?" Because you have an accent. And I was like, "I'm from Brazil." Brazil? How? And I was like, I said, well, if you learn about Brazil history, we are like one of the countries that have like a lot of mix.
correct,
We're really mixed. We
correct.
have all the mixes
Skin
you can,
colors,
skin colors you can imagine. There's no like Brazilian face, or
right,
it's not everybody a brunette or
right.
like Hispanic,
Blonde, or
or
you don't have all these racial categories, and
no, it's
that's the
so
free.
yeah,
That's the same thing that happened in Puerto Rico. Everybody was, how did you adapt to Puerto Rico? I said, there were Puerto Ricans darker than I was. I said, no one really didn't know I was American until I started speaking. So it
exactly.
was just like, I just fit in. I just blended and I felt natural. And nobody was judging me because of my skin color or anything else like that. Everybody just
Yeah.
mixed together, went to the beach and had fun. So
Exactly,
I
yeah,
can understand what your experience was like coming
yeah,
here. Because,
yes,
see, this is the one thing about the United States that a lot of people don't get. When people immigrate here to the United States, this culture teaches them racism. This
yeah,
culture teaches them classism. They want you to believe, oh, you're light skinned, you're very light skinned, fair skinned, you have blonde hair, so you're better than the other people who are
yeah,
dark and darker.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's what they try to teach and try to instill in you. And it's
yeah,
wrong. It's very
yeah,
wrong.
And also to put you in boxes and separate things. Like I was really shocked when I came here, and I was going to tell you something. When I came here as an exchange student, it was my second time in US, but the difference within like a month, because 1 month before I moved to be as an exchange student, I went to Disney World. So I went to Orlando and all the parks. So for me, when I went to Orlando and all the parks and Miami and all this, so for me that was a like, wow, this is United States. And then when I went to as an exchange student to South Bend, then it was like
You're right. Culture shock.
culture shock. But when I went to as an exchange student, I have to fill out a bunch of forms, and one of the forms was to like, what is your race and what is your, like a bunch of, and it was like I never had to,
Ethnicity. Yeah.
yeah, I was like I never had to answer that. I was like, this is weird, and I couldn't in like any
Any
possibility.
category.
No, I couldn't.
Because you weren't raised with that mentality.
Yeah, and it was like, this is so weird. So yeah, so I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. There's differences. So you went to South Bend and you studied creative writing, correct?
At South Bend, I was an exchange student, just
So
regular high school.
school, okay.
Creative writing was much later. It was in 2013.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you went to South Bend as an exchange student while you were still in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how long were you here in the United States as an exchange student?
Just for 1 year.
1 year, 1 year. So then you went back to Brazil and your party life.
My party life.
Life, okay. And so then when was your next excursion back here to the United States?
Later on, like almost 20 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what triggered that?
Well, that is a long story, which I'm not going to tell you today. One
Okay.
day I tell you because it's a
Okay.
long, long story.
Okay.
But that long story, it ended up for me deciding to study creative writing
Mhm.
in San Diego.
Okay.
And
What college?
US, the University of San Diego.
San Diego State?
Yeah.
San Diego State
No,
University.
no, it was the University of San Diego.
Well, there's another college called
Yeah.
University of San Diego.
It's at UCSD, I think. Yeah, UCSD.
University of California, San
San
Diego
Diego.
State. That's where I
Mhm.
went to UCSD up in La
UCSD.
Jolla. Up
Yeah,
in La Jolla.
yeah,
I did
exactly.
it. I did a year up at UCSD in La Jolla, and then I transferred to UCLA. So we are alum buddies. Then
Yeah,
we came from the same school system, the
exactly.
UC system. Okay, buddy. Okay, that's great. That's great. So you did how many years? Because see, I did 5 years. It took me 5 years to graduate. I was in a biochemistry, so it took me 5 years. How many years did it take you to graduate?
No, that I graduated in another thing. I graduated in Brazil.
Okay.
I went to like, it's interesting. I went to another route.
Okay.
I graduated as a fashion designer. Yeah, but during the time I was studying fashion design
Okay.
back in Brazil, I was already like writing about fashion. So I did a bunch of internships in fashion design,
Mhm.
in fashion journalism, and I was always writing. And then my first job as in the fashion industry, I ended up going to fashion marketing and fashion writing. And I was all into that. And then later on, I ended up opening my content agency, which we used to work with fashion industry. So we used to create content for blogs. It was like the blogging time. And then a little bit later, I started doing social media for fashion industry. So it was during that time that I decided to study creative writing because I had my business, which was this content agency. I was writing for fashion for a long time, and I was missing writing for writing, or just like writing stories. I was just like writing this. It became like a mechanic thing, like just writing about fashion in the industry or commercial things, and then I was missing
You
the
lost that
writing.
excitement and zeal.
Yes,
for
yes.
writing.
Yeah, and that's why I ended up going to study in San Diego, but it was a short course. It wasn't
Okay.
like a long time.
Okay.
But during that time, I had my business, my content agency, and I was doing online. I had an office in Rio, but I could work anywhere. So I kind of gave myself time to step out of my comfort zone and study creative writing and start writing, going back to the writing that I was missing.
Right. See, for me, there's different genres of writing, and I've never been a writer. People tell me I write very well, but I've never been a writer. But I have read, but the only type of writing I enjoy reading are kind of like fantasy novels. I enjoy fantasy novels. So when you speak about creative writing, which genre do you really feel like you're at home in?
So that's is an interesting question because, like I said, I was missing writing stories, right? Because when you write, people say you write well. You should start writing, and then you say, okay, but you can write what kind of thing you're saying. I end up going to the content writing, for bloggings and commercial things, and then later social media and that it takes out of the writing part, like creating characters and creating stories. So I was missing that thing. So when I went to San Diego to study creative writing, I was trying to figure out what I was going to write and what kind of things I was missing
Correct.
because I had all these stories that I wrote when I was a kid, a teenager. I had like a bunch of books that I started and never finished. And it was always like fiction. I always
Mm,
loved to write fiction, but I didn't know exactly what to do with that. With the course in San Diego, the it was in 2013. 2014, I was back in Brazil and I was like, I'm going to do something with that. And I realized that I wanted to write films. I want to write TV series. So that's why in 2014 I decided to study screenwriting. So
Now, I'm going to stop you there
yeah.
because, see, writing a story and a novel is much different than writing a film or television script. And I mean, I always wanted to write film and TV scripts, but it just seemed so much different than writing a story
Yeah.
because, I mean, you have to think about scene, you have to think about
Hmm.
character interaction, you got to think about breaks, I mean, there is a whole lot more mentally going on when you're writing a script
Hmm.
because it's based upon imagery.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And I think well, my I have a screenwriting mentor.
Hmm.
She was actually my first screenwriting instructor in
Hmm.
2014.
Hmm.
And then later in 2020, I reached to
Hmm.
her to help me go back to writing for
Right.
screenplays.
Okay.
And she told me, she's been working with that for like 30 years. And then she told me, like, Rita, you have one thing that is kind of not gonna say rare, but it's not is unusual. You are the type of writer. You can write any type of thing. You can write a
Wow.
novel
Mm.
and you can write a script. But you're right, because it's you can write the same story, but when you put it together as a script and you put it together as a novel or a short story, the structure, the way you write it
It's
is
different.
is completely different. And it can change the story because of the visual part.
Exactly. The imagery.
Yes, and this happened with my film. This happened with my film because the film was a short story. It was a novel, and then I turned into a film, and then I had to change it. I had to change the time of the story.
Mhm.
The story happened in another time, and
Okay.
then when it became a film, it couldn't happen during that time.
Mhm.
I had to add elements that
Mhm.
it won't make sense in a
Right.
film.
Right.
So again, it's a thing about adapting.
Adapting and yeah, being able to adapt. So
be
this
able
is
to
your
adapt.
recent short film, The Fat Lady. She just wanted to be called by her name. What inspired this story? What inspired that name? And what was the journey of turning it from a written piece at UCSD into a film?
So I was studying in San Diego, creative writing, and then to wrap up the course, we needed every student needed to write a short story, open topic. We were about 20 students, and each one had to write their short story, and we had to share with everyone on an email. So on the day that we had to present our stories, we would have the feedback of each one of the students about your story. So I did that as and as everybody did. And then we didn't know at the end the structures, they were like a couple. They would go and pick like the three best ones. And mine was the best one. And I was surprised because they told me that I was the only foreigner in the class. And they told me I wrote the most American story ever. And I when I was writing the story, I was thinking about some of the things I experienced when I was an exchange student. So I think that's why they could identify like it was such an Americana story.
Well, that's strange to me because my assistant, Jenny Lynn, she's from the Philippines. When we're speaking, you can definitely tell that she's from the Philippines. And it seems like she doesn't have, like an extraordinary grasp of English. Boy, oh boy, when she writes, she just blows you away. I mean, there's no way for you to tell that this woman is from the Philippines. I mean, she's an extraordinary writer. So I can embrace and understand what you're saying because you may speak and you communicate one way, but when you write, you have a totally different expressional voice.
Yeah, exactly.
So your writing can express itself in a totally different manner than what you're able to speak. And I never really experienced that until I hired this woman in the Philippines to handle all my script writing and everything else. And initially, when I was introduced to her by this firm, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. I don't think this is going to work because how are we going to communicate?
Yeah.
But her writing is just extraordinary.
So this it was very interesting, but I
How did you
got
get the name though? The name.
so the name is extremely important for the whole story. And when I turn into a film, it's like even more important. I had some of producers saying maybe we should change the name of the movie, and it could be aggressive. It could be, but I said, but that's the purpose because
Mhm.
it makes sense for the story. Without the name, the story wouldn't make any sense, and especially because of the ending,
Okay.
which I cannot tell, of course.
All right. Okay.
But yeah, so in a way to provoke. The story is about provoking the society because the story is about how we look at other people, our neighbors, and we judge them without knowing them.
Okay. Now let me ask you a question. Is this book currently published for
The
sale?
the you mean the film or the story?
The film and the story.
No, the film is being editing at this moment right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have to bring you back after it's finished. What about it? Has it ever been offered in written form?
No, I
Okay.
wrote the story, and I wanted to turn into a short film since the beginning
Okay.
in 2013. It took me almost 10 years. Actually, it took me um 11 years to make it happen.
Well, once again, a lot of people don't realize when you are going into the film industry, and especially if you're doing a film independent, it still costs quite a bit of money.
Oh yeah.
It's a very, very expensive undertaking. I
Yes.
have a friend right now has been struggling to get a documentary done for years now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's a very expensive undertaking.
yeah. And I had some setbacks
Okay.
during the process.
Yes. As someone who helps others tell their stories, what have you discovered about the relationship between storytelling and healing?
Man, storytelling and healing, they're completely connected. Just think about therapy. When you go to a therapy, you're you talk more than you listen to the therapist. Sometimes the therapist even doesn't say a word because the therapy session is a safe place that you can talk. And then when you talk, you end up hearing yourself. So storytelling is the same process. Is when you tell a story, you tell your story,
Uh-huh.
you end up listening to what you're saying, you listen to your story. So it helps finding clarity.
Okay.
Also storytelling and healing, they're like they go along,
Okay. They work together.
they work together.
That's good. That's good. Okay. You've been open about your experience concerning breast cancer and surviving it. How many times? How many times have you shared this in the public?
100% of the time.
Okay, 100% of the time. Okay, so can you tell us a little bit about that journey? How long ago? How did you determine that you had breast cancer, and what was your first immediate reaction to that?
So I found out the breast cancer in 2022.
Mhm.
It's interesting that's why I like to share. In the end of 2021, I was finally able to have health insurance here in US. So it was like 6 years without having health insurance. I just had like an emergency type of health insurance. So I was without doing my mammogram for all these years. So when I got the health insurance, I was like, let me do my mammogram. And then I did. And since I had some lumps, I always had it for 20 years and I always checked them. They were just like fatty lumps, they call.
Right,
They said, well, since we don't have your history here, instead of waiting a year to repeat the image, let's repeat within 6 months. So I said, okay. So next year, 2022, I went back to Rio to visit my family, had
mhm,
some great time. Came back to the US. I had the mammogram scheduled in May, and I did. And then when I did, they said, let's do an ultrasound too.
mhm,
And when I did the ultrasound, they said, well, there's one here that we need to biopsy. And I was like,
okay,
serious? Because I don't have
right,
history in my family,
okay,
um, especially on my mom's side. I
mhm,
had one person in my dad's side, but it's usually on the mother's side.
right,
And then I said, okay, let's biopsy. I was like, that would be nothing. And
right,
then I did, and then my doctor called me, and then I was driving back home. He called me and said, "Are you driving?" When he said that,
right.
yeah, can you pull over because I need to talk to you? I said, "Oh my
Wow.
gosh!" And then he said, "Well, it is cancer, and then I'm gonna refer you to an oncologist." And then I went there within 2 days, and then she told me it is a big one. It is an aggressive type. It is like a rare type. And you need to start doing the treatment within a month. And I was like, okay. I cry. And then it was like, okay, when let's do it. Let's start the treatment. And then my mom came and then she stayed with me the whole period of my treatment. Yeah.
And that can be a very traumatic experience, me being going through medical school and also being a physician many times. Women struggle with the decision of how they're going to handle that. Are they going to go through chemo? Are they
Yeah.
going to have a partial mastectomy or a full
Yeah.
mastectomy? Just it's not just having cancer.
No, it's
It's like you have to make a personal choice
all
of
the time.
yeah, all the time of how you're going to approach this thing,
Yeah.
and you have to do it in a way where you're empowered, that you feel like you can defeat this thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm pretty straightforward and really rational. So I found out the cancer. I cried, like I said, and it was like, okay, so now let's what I need to do. And then I got a second opinion, of course, and the second opinion doctor in Brazil. He told me that the treatment that I was going to go here, it is the only. They told me here too, but I wanted to
Mhm.
have a second opinion. Is the only type of for the type that I had
Mhm.
is a rare one,
Right.
and there's only one type of a treatment. So
Treatment for it.
yeah, so there's like no way to choose, or I would have to go through the treatment or
Right.
not do the treatment.
Treatment. Wow.
And then I said, well, I'm going through the treatment, and then there's like only one treatment and one way of doing. The steps are always the same steps. So the only thing I had to choose besides that doing the treatment or not doing the treatment was if I was going to do mastectomy or just a lumpectomy.
Right.
That was a decision that I made it. And then I did the lumpectomy for my case. But so once I had those choices made,
Mhm.
and I said, let's get it started. And I decided to be open about this journey with everybody. And
Yeah.
I shared this journey through my social media, my blog, and everything.
So you state you're a very logical person, and you develop this logical process through your writing, I'm assuming.
Yes.
So it's kind of almost like your approach to this challenge was kind of similar to how you approach writing. So you were kind of preconditioned, to handle this whole experience.
Yes, exactly. Yes, it's like when you like organize, when you have to structure like a screenplay, because
Hmm.
a screenplay is all about structure, right? Here you're gonna put this type of emotion. Here you're gonna put this type of thing. Here, so it's
The
the same
lighting, the
way.
set, the scene.
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's a lot to it. Just your scripted screenwriting is a very, very logical
yeah.
process. How did this experience with cancer transform your work and the way you help others tell stories?
I think it's just kind of it helped me to reaffirm the importance of being authentic.
Hmm.
Because I remember when I started sharing these stories, a lot of people reached to me, some friends that had cancer and I never knew. And they told me, wow, I didn't have the courage or I didn't want to expose myself, telling my story or showing like my bald hair
Hmm.
and my bald head. And it's like they were like, I'm so surprised and I'm so proud of you that you're just being yourself. So I think it helps me that to show you just to be authentic. And that doesn't mean everyone that goes through a cancer needs to share their story.
Right.
They're gonna share if they want to share because it's about being authentic. For me, it wouldn't be authentic if I decided not to share because I was never like a person that would like hide my bad sides or my
Right.
struggles. So for
Right.
me, it just reaffirm of being authentic is for me the only
Okay.
way.
Right.
It's like it could be kind of a cliche to say like be yourself, but this is what I believe. It's to this journey with cancer taught me
Hmm.
that we need to own our true
Hmm.
flaws and
Hmm. Hmm.
everything else.
Hmm. Okay. Being that you're in the film business, plus you're in the fashion business, you've had to deal with creative individuals and then entrepreneurs. What's the common barrier you see people facing when trying to embrace others with authentic stories from different cultures?
Again, we go back to the same thing. It's I think the biggest barrier is the fear of being yourself to like we say in Brazil to of affording to be yourself. Like this is how I am, and
Right.
this is what I decided to show. Also, I think many people worry about, like whether their authentic story will be accepted, because if they will be accepted,
Hmm.
or whether it will aligns with their professional demands.
Hmm.
I know it's so like scary, to put your real self, out there, especially when you think it's not going to resonate with your work or
Right.
pay the bills.
Right.
But I think there's no other way. That's the only.
But see, that's the one thing about the entertainment industry. It seems like whenever you want to create something, there's always someone who's trying to tell you how to change it, what might make it better, how you could present it to impact a broader audience. And so, I mean, a lot of people, they just don't have that stubbornness and that desire to be authentic, to say, no, 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 this is the way I wrote it. This is the way it has to be presented.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That's I'm sorry, cutting you, but
That's good.
that reminds me the situation with the title of my film.
Hmm.
I had like people saying, don't use that. I said, no, but I want it because it makes sense, for the story. It makes sense for what I'm trying to tell. Change it. It would change, what I wanted to share, how I wanted to be authentic. So yeah.
Well, and I think so too. A lot of that is because a lot of the individuals in the creative industry and entrepreneurs, they have to put up this fake imagery. So,
Mhm.
they're much different at home than they are at work. And so when you have to put on a costume to go to work every day, and then you come home and you're this person, well, which one are you? Your authenticity gets lost in your pursuit of your career. You lose your authenticity in the pursuit of your career. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. And I think a lot of it is cultural. I think you find that more here in the United States and maybe in England than you do in other places. That people feel like you have to fit inside of this particular box.
Yeah,
Everything has to fit inside of this nice little box or inside of this nice little circle in order for society to accept it.
yeah, I agree.
Okay. How do you help people find the courage to share their vulnerable stories?
I think courage comes in two ways. I think first is by understanding that sharing your verbal story can make a difference in someone's life, can help someone. Like if someone like with dealing with breast cancer, and I'm telling that because it happened with me. Like
You're right.
people that found out that breast cancer after me, and they saw my post and read my blog post. They're like, oh my gosh, I can be myself. I don't need to like wear a wig, to cover or, to express how I'm feeling. She helped me somehow. So I think that's the first thing, like, is when you share your story, you can help someone else. And I think the second thing is by realizing that when you open yourself, you're open yourself for your own healing. Because when you're vulnerable, it's such a powerful thing because it helps to connect us and remind us that we're not alone. Because there's other people with similar stories or going to similar situations.
Well, I'm going to ask this question anyways. I think I already know the answer, but as someone deeply immersed in both creativity and marketing, how do you balance authenticity with your professional demands?
And yeah, I think you
Yeah,
know the answer.
it's
Yeah.
I
And but I know that at the end we need to pay the bills, so sometimes you take jobs that don't align with your soul,
right,
but the closer you can get, you know, to embracing your authentic self and sharing that with the world, the more you attract the right tribe,
right,
the
exactly,
minded people. But sometimes you just have to,
right, right.
do what you have to do to pay the bills. But
Bills, right.
Yeah, but I think it comes, of course, it comes with the experience in life. It comes with
Okay. What advice would you give to creative people who are struggling to maintain their artistic vision during difficult times?
I'm gonna sound that I'm repeating, right? But it's the same thing, man. Stay true to your vision, even in the small ways, because difficult times can sometimes pull you away from your art, from
Hmm.
from what you like doing. But those moments of creativity, even if brief, will ground you, So just like keep showing up, for your passion and trust that if you stay authentic, you will attract the support and the opportunities that you're looking for, that you need.
Okay, let's do some rapid quick fire questions.
Oh my God.
What's your go-to creative outlet when facing challenges?
Like, I like to, that's a good one. I like to go to like an art exhibition. When I need to, I'm facing challenges, I'm having some blocks and writing and stuff. I like to go and see art. That helps me.
Okay. Which Brazilian saying about resilience resonates with you?
There's a Brazilian saying that I have I found out the translation in English that makes sense. So I have it in front of me here, so I'm gonna
Hmm.
read it to you. So
Okay.
it's something like water dripping day by day wears the hardest rock away. And
So
yeah,
persistence overcomes everything, basically.
yeah.
Okay. What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself through filmmaking?
Filmmaking is very interesting. The most important thing is about community.
Okay.
It's incredible. You don't do a film by yourself. You just don't do it. You
Yeah.
need people. You need to
Yeah.
have a community. Yeah.
So you have to have a target audience when you're doing a film. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. How do you know when a story needs to be told?
I think all the stories should be told. I think everybody needs to tell your story. So I think there is no boundaries when it comes to that.
Now, this is going to be a hard question because I'm also an artist.
Here you
When do
go.
you know a story is complete?
I would say like the basic stuff when it has like a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Because I mean, we as artists, you can continue writing, overwriting, redrawing. You can continue and actually mess something up because you
Yeah,
never stop. You don't realize, okay, I need to stop.
yeah. But like I said, for me, I have this. I think maybe that's the reason that my mentor told me that I can write anything is because I have this rational mind. So for me, there's a moment like, get over, just you're done.
Okay,
You don't need to
okay,
rewrite it, rewrite it, rewrite.
you're right. Okay,
Yeah.
community and connection. You're passionate about community and culture. How does this influence your approach to both storytelling and resilience?
Well, community and culture, right? They are the heart of storytelling. So because they teach us a value, diversity, connection, and learn from one another.
Well, see,
So
and I think that's
mhm,
what a lot of us forget when we're in a trying time. Your strength actually comes from your culture.
mhm,
So, when you're faced with all these problems, different situations, and things happening in your life, your culture, what you were taught as a child, the things you heard your parents talk about, the stories you heard about your grandparents, all of that is a root that feeds into you and strengthens you and gives you an ability to be able to look at things and say, I'm not doing this by myself. I have some history
yeah,
behind me.
yep, yep.
Okay.
And we use the stories to create empathy,
Mhm,
to celebrate differences, and
mhm,
to inspire
mhm.
ourselves and others. So
Okay, now we're going to go into the section of the show called Flip Mode. You have three questions you get to answer me. I've had you under fire. Now you get to put me under fire.
okay. So I wrote three questions here.
Mhm, mhm.
Can I just
Yeah,
go and
go
ask you?
one. Ask one at a time. I'll answer them.
Okay, I have those written here. So,
Okay.
what inspired you to start this podcast, and how has your journey shaped the way you approach storytelling or amplify voices from different perspectives.
I really, really developed this podcast as an extension of my nonprofit. And my nonprofit, we're going through a lot of cultural upheaval everywhere. And you have nonprofit agencies that seem to reach out to one culture or another culture or one people or this area, that area. And I wanted a nonprofit that reached out and touched all people, all cultures, all religions, no matter where you were at in the world, no matter what your story is. I wanted this nonprofit to be able to reach out, unite, and build and help transform you. And so this podcast is an extension of my nonprofit, my way to reach out to different people, different cultures, share their experiences with the world while empowering them
Mhm.
also. So we both grow together.
Okay. Second question. So, what's one of the most impactful stories you've heard on the show? And what about it resonated with you or your audience the most?
Wow. Well, I haven't had a lot of shows, but I think the most impactful show I've had so far, just prior to you, my sister, she was dealing with PTSD and came very close several times to killing herself. I mean,
Wow.
hearing voices telling her to kill herself, sometimes
Good.
while she was driving.
Wow.
And so, to see her move from that to the type of outgoing person she is and trying to change other people's lives, who are dealing with depression. I mean, that was pretty impactful for me to hear her story. It's a strong story, but then it's even stronger hearing something like that coming from your baby sister.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then the last one, as someone who shares stories from a wide range of backgrounds, how do you balance highlighting the personal struggles of your guests while keeping the conversation uplifting and inspiring?
Well, I think that's energy. I think that's energy. I mean, I think people feed off of your energy. And that's why we spent a little bit of time talking and communicating before we got into the show. Because you have to create that energy. You have to create that authenticity. I have to feel your vibe and your energy, and I have to sample that vibe and energy and process it and then send my vibe and energy out to you for you to process it so that it becomes like a very, very genuine experience. I don't think anybody will listen to this podcast and feel like it is scripted because there's a genuine energy. And so I think that is the most important component of me. And I've heard this also. A lot of people say, I like how you connect with your guests.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
and and that's very important for me to be able to connect with you. And that's difficult for me because I'm a nonconformist. I'm really alone. So for me to actually get out and do this, I mean, there are different parts of myself, but this is a part of myself that I just normally don't tap into. I'm not an outgoing person. I'm not trying to speak to everybody on the street. I don't want everybody speaking to me. I'm not a salesman. So this is very much, this is very much, an extension of myself, but it's an extension of myself that's very much me, and I enjoy it, and I can do it in this manner.
Like that.
Okay, before we wrap up, tell us about what's next for you and where our listeners will be able to find your short story after it's done. Well, your
So,
movie. It's a movie, not a short
yeah,
story.
yeah, it is a short film, but I say it is a short film, but a long short film because it's
Okay.
it's 25 minutes, so it's a long short film. So we are on the editing
Hmm.
process. Was supposed to be done a little bit earlier, but I had an accident happening
Okay.
with my husband
Okay.
a month ago, and kind of stop a little bit, pause a little
Okay.
bit, but
So when do you project it to be finished?
I hope the next month is going to be finished. The main goal for this short film is to be sent to film festivals
Okay.
around the world.
Okay.
For some specific ones, but I'm gonna do a premiere here too
Mhm.
because these short
Where
films,
is here?
Indianapolis,
Okay.
Indianapolis area.
Okay. Okay.
So this film, we had more than 50 actors and extras. We had 16 people on my crew
Mhm.
and a cat and a bird. So
Okay.
I had a lot of people in this film, and everybody's like asking me when I'm going to watch it and where. So I needed to do a premiere here.
Mhm.
And like I said, I was going to have it done in November. The idea of the premiere was going to be in November, but now we need to finish the editing. So I hope to have it ready for the film festivals for next year. And I'll let you know which
Okay.
film
I
festivals we're able to get in and which place in the world.
Well, I hope you invite me to your premiere so I can bring my camera and, we can do an interview and sit
Yeah.
down and talk about everything and get that up there to help you promote this.
But you guys can also check the website. There's a
Okay.
dedicated website for the
Okay.
film,
Okay.
which is thefatladyfilm.com. So there's a lot of material there because we did a lot of pictures and,
Mhm.
and some short videos. So you can like go and see the making of it.
Okay.
It's kind of fun.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm always like sharing the next steps there as well.
Okay. So I'll make sure Jenny Lynn contacts you and gets all that information to your website and everything. Now you were just speaking about your husband. What country is your husband from?
It's American.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Okay. Before we wrap up, and this has been a great podcast, I've had a lot of fun doing this podcast.
Thank you.
Finally, what message would you like to leave with our listeners about finding strength in their own stories?
Keeping really short, your story matters.
Story matters. That's great. That's great. Thank you, Rita, for sharing your journey and wisdom with us today. Our listeners are truly going to be blessed by what you've shared today. I think it's an impactful story, but I think it's also transforming because we all go through struggles and, there's just so much going on in the world today. It's easy to give up and to lose hope. But, through our cultural diversity, our cultures, and our strength, and using that as our root, we can use that to help propel us via persistence, that dripping water that dissolves any rock
Yep,
to
exactly.
allow us to overcome. So I thank you for allowing us to be a part of, your challenges and your success and where you're headed. So I just thank you for being such a great guest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, this is the end of the show. We'll see you next time on the All About Us podcast.